Good morning, and welcome to the latest edition of Shooting Straight with me, Voice of the Forge. Today is another of our community spotlights, and this one was brought to my attention by Magnus the Brony. So, whilst I am talking about the subject from my perspective, I have taken perspectives from other players as well. And with regards to this, we are now talking today about misogyny in games and gaming media. The main spotlight today will be the fact that we have found a new channel dedicated to the lore of Warhammer 40k. And if you know anything about Games Workshop, then you know recently that they've changed their name to Warhammer and rebranded. So, are they misogynistic? Particularly with regards to the 40k brand, the questions have been asked: is it misogynistic, and are those men who play it? Bearing in mind that this completely destroys all of the female fans of the genre and of the game itself, but this seems to be the narrative being formed around the hobby by people generally on the outside. So, as someone who has occasionally dipped in and out of the hobby, mainly due to cost and time factors, um, I suffer from a lack of an awareness on this issue. Um, this is something that I'm aware of, but is not something that I have come across myself. Now, this issue has been covered in much more depth by the aforementioned YouTube channel, and they have done more than sort of like 2 hours of video, followed by a half-hour interview with a woman who plays Warhammer. We have links below so that you can see these magnificent masterpieces for what they are. The reason we're chipping in is that whilst those videos are quite funny and they can be seen as a typical woman attacks man's hobby, man makes angry video, we are trying not to fall into that response. What we are trying to do is try to elucidate further and actually examine what some of these claims may be focusing on at the expense of others. So, with accounts from myself and Magnus the Brony, the first question we're going to answer is 40k, and especially the men who play it, misogynistic? And the short answer to this is no. And if that's all that you want to hear, that's fine. That's the short answer. If you want to listen to more on this, then the long answer is incoming. And for those who get the reference, rumour control, here are the facts. Right there, so part one. There are almost no female models, and the ones that are overtly and overly sexualised. And this seems to be the keystone of what almost every argument on the subject revolves around. There are very few distinctly female models in 40k, and most people say some, but I say most of what there is on offer, if you take them as carte blanche being the only female representatives, do tend to be on this overtly sexualised side. But then, there are reasons for this. I mean, the Space Marines. If we look at the Space Marines full stop, and whilst this seems to be the first step in every complaint against 40k, the Legion Astartes are all dudes. Yeah, but have you seen what kind of dudes they are? They're superhuman. Okay. If we start looking into the fluff, and we're not going back to Rogue Trader times, we're talking about current editions, because the game has expanded and it has evolved over time. So it's only really fair to look at the game as it is today, rather than historically. And the Space Marines are superhuman. They go through this process, and the training, the conditioning, the drug regimen and surgery that makes someone who is human into a Space Marine is, as we can say, taxing to say the least, shall we? We can all agree that it's a little bit on the difficult side. And I believe if we actually look at the fluff, only 1 in 3 that actually undertake this process actually survive. And the reason that they're all men is because the women that they have tried to undertake this process haven't succeeded. And one thing that you have to know as well is the 1 in 3. That's not just random people off the street. That's picking the best. That's picking the best of the best of the best from multiple worlds throughout the Imperium to even begin to try this process. So you're talking about sort of like Dolph Lundgren, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Sylvester Stallone, and only one of those 3 would make it through the process. You're not going to have very many women that are going to get very far against people like that in the first place. So if that's their starting position, then it's going to get a hell of a lot harder from there on in. So, as I was saying, women have been put through these same trials back when the Emperor was alive and kicking, bearing in mind he's been on the Golden Throne for God knows how many thousands of years, and due to innate physical differences, well, okay, even fewer women made it through the process and in time were phased out. Okay, if that's in the fluff, then fair enough. Some of them did do it, but obviously not enough to make it a worthwhile exercise, especially when you're considering that these guys are going to fight against some of the biggest, baddest, evilest aliens that you can think of across the known galaxy. So basically, the effort that was required obviously gets phased out because they need more Space Marines. They're not going to have 30 women put through the trials in order to get 10 if they know that they can put 30 men through and they can just amalgamate them straight into another regime straight away because there's already 1,000 of them. They're going to have to put together God knows how many thousands of women to even get 1,000 working female Space Marines. So the time and effort, bearing in mind that we are at war, in the fluff, it seems to indicate a general risk-cost principle. So, this need to keep the Space Marines stocked over the next 10,000 or so years, you've got a reliable indicator of where your resources are best spent, especially if they're under pressure, as they are in the 40k universe. Everything is under pressure, everything is failing, all the technology that they're using are patterned and they're not coming up with anything of their own, and the Imperium is in decline. This is something that people forget. This is the last bastion of a warlike empire, and it is virtually the Empire's last stand. So there are going to be things in place which are not going to fly in a modern day society as we know it. It is a game first and foremost, but it also has this grim dark reality which people do tend to forget is a major issue. So at the end of the day, this is all fluff. It's all conjecture, it's all lore, it's all background. And at any time it can be retconned. At any time they can turn around and go, you know what, we're going to have more females than males. There's a new breed of woman arisen who can withstand the trials 10 times better than men. Therefore, men are now the weaker, and it's not going to be worth the risk in dealing with that. But they haven't done so. They do certain bits of retconning from time to time, which is why I say we're not going back to the Rogue Trader days. Because if you actually went back to the Rogue Trader days, Space Marines weren't even human, and they were vat-grown clones. So you've even got that argument. So it's not. It isn't a sign of. This isn't a tiny detail. The Space Marines have always been something other than human, and this does go back to the game's roots. And to change it that significantly would outrage quite a lot of long-time members of the community. And there have been things that Games Workshop or Warhammer, as we should be referring to them now, have done things, and they have alienated large parts of their core membership, which is why over the last couple of years we've seen a massive change and direction in the company and at the gaming stores. Again, because this is a geeky community, they take the lore seriously. It's something that is integral to the game's experience. It's not just the game they're playing, because they play it through all of the wonky rules and spirit of the rules to the letter of the rules and all the rest of it, because they love their lore. Now, because anyone out there complains that this is simply men trying to keep their man club, then we have to realise that this is something which traditionally women haven't been involved in and men have been relegated to on their own terms. So there is quite a bit of kickback and a bit of resistance, purely because the sort of like, well, this is our space that we created because we weren't allowed anywhere else, and now you're going to come in and kick all over that. No, we've got to make a stand somewhere. But that's by the by. So if we take that all aside, and then we look at the Battle Sisters, the one chapter that there was of Space Marines, the Adeptus Sororitas, and these were the counterpart to the monogendered Space Marines. They were religious, they were a battle order, and by their own holy rites they refused to indoctrinate men. So they're just as bad. They've got their own rights, their own ways in which they're going to make the women that are going to become the Battle Sisters. And yet I find it strange that, yeah, don't get called out on that. It's perfectly fine for women to actually go, no, we're just not going to recruit men, as opposed to an order that says, well, we've tried recruiting women, but it doesn't quite work. Yeah, there's a bit of an imbalance there. Don't you see it? Maybe. In terms of ability, the Adeptus Sororitas are all but equal to Space Marines. They wear the same armour, they use the same weapons, and they also have some of their own that the standard Marines don't have access to. And they only really differ in one purpose, and that the Marines are shock troops. These are guys that you fly in at a moment's notice to basically crush, break, bend, completely scrap someone's army, and then when they've killed them, completely demoralise whatever's left. And these Marines are sent into battles and environments that if you or I were to go into, we'd be dead in less than a second. Never mind anything else. We just wouldn't be able to handle the sheer overwhelming alienness of it. We'd probably go mad. Never mind the fact that some of these planets are toxic and all these other things. But the Sororitas aren't shock troops. These Battle Sisters are bound to the ecclesiarchy, which is a counterpart, really, to the Inquisition that runs through the Empire of Man. Their job is to protect the faith. They're not sent in there in order to die, as many Space Marines are. They are shock troops to kill or be killed. The Sororitas are there to protect the faith. I mean, this doesn't stop them fighting on the same battlefields as the Marines when the need arises, and as the need every so often does, every sister will fight to their last breath to defend the Imperium, but that's only the same as the Marines. It's the fact that, given the necessity, they fight, but they're not bred exclusively to fight. They are there for a slightly different purpose and a slightly different reason, and as such they have slightly different roles within the gaming lore, and to a lesser extent in the game itself, because at the end of the day it's a battle game. You put miniatures on a table, you roll dice to see who shoots whom the most, and whoever wins. So at the end of the day, what we're talking about really is the game's background rather than the game itself, because little plastic miniatures and dice can't be misogynistic. They don't give a shit who's handling them. They really don't. They're inert. They don't have any kind of preference to whether or not they're played by a woman or a man. They treat equally. It's the random number generator, the roll of chance. So the game itself isn't misogynistic. The only thing that you can argue is about the background and the lore, which is what we're discussing. So this has gotten a little bit off topic because at the end of the day we're delving into the fluff. But that is the whole argument that is being made, and it has to be brought up sooner or later, because this is the crux of the argument to say that the game is misogynistic, because the game itself can't be. The figures and the plastics and the dice don't give a shit. Anyway, the Sisters of Battle are brought up as a point of showing how misogynistic Games Workshop actually are. Warhammer, actually. The models themselves are much the same as the Space Marines, but with a moulded breastplate and more holy icons. Well, I'm very sorry, but if we look back to my example of the 3 Space Marines that would take the test, Dolph Lundgren, Sylvester Stallone and Jean-Claude Van Damme, But they are excessively male in their physique when you look at their films, are they not? They are supposed to be the tip top that a man can achieve. If you are putting women in battle armour and everything else, then you have to signify somehow to players that what they're handling is a female model and not a male model. So there has to be a little bit of exaggeration in certain places in order to show the feminine characteristic. And if you can't accept that, then there's no fucking hope for you. It's as simple as that, right? Yeah. This shows their sexuality. It's got to be done, otherwise you could be handling bloody corks out of the top of wine bottles and just paint them pretty colours and call them whatever you wanted. The game would still exist, but you wouldn't have them pretty miniatures. You just have standard cardboard blocks. Right? This is called artistic integrity. It's artistic expression and artistic integrity. Right? So it's not like we don't already know that they're women. That's already been established. And whilst I don't have any real breasts of my own yet, give it time, takeaways and beer, I'd expect that if I had a suit of armour, I'd want somewhere to put them. Yeah? Standard sort of human morphology. And then you hear the people cry, why can't they have a larger, smooth breastplate like the Space Marines do? Again, this comes down to the sisters have a feminine appearance to their armour and people complain. Never once heard someone saying, oh, this is a man, their proportions are distinctly male. Though I guess if you put helmets on all of them, you couldn't fucking tell. What isn't there is the codpiece, front and centre, and almost every variant of Space Marine. Not to mention that some legions do decorate their armour in manly ways, from the Space Wolf trophies and pelts to the Blood Angels actually painting ripped musculature onto their chest plates. But this is all by and by. If you wanted to have a female Space Marine chapter, you painted it pink and said this is all women, there is nothing to stop you, technically, other than the fact most people will go, well, you do know this is in the law. And you turn around and go, I don't care, that's what I want to play. People can't stop you. Right? And this is the biggest issue with all this, people. You can fantasize all that you want. Anyway, so, to address the booby plate in the room, look at the Imperial Guard. Right. Now, for those who don't know, the Space Marines are the shock troopers that have been bred, that have been cut, and have been drugged to within the nth degree of their life to become behemoths. These guys usually stand between 8 and 10 feet tall, as opposed to a normal human at 6 feet, and they are built to destroy. The Imperial Guard are the regular human men and women from across the galaxy. They are normal human size, they have normal human weapons, they have normal human vehicles. They serve in various roles, from the frontline grunt, to commanders, to tank crew, to sort of like the ranks of the commissariat and elsewhere. These are the vast majority of the Imperium troops, and they are just normal humans. Now again, there are a couple of female models for the Imperials, but most of them are male. This is as the bulk of a guard army would be, with troop squads or tanks, and as it stands at the moment, the current basic troops are all male miniatures, and the tanks generally don't show more of a person than a head poking out of a hatch, and even that's optional. Now, the female models are dressed in much the same uniform as their male counterparts. Yeah, some of them a small amount of cleavage can be seen, but this can be easily solved with a paintbrush. Or green stuff. And here's the thing. You can easily construct a guards army that's impossible to tell if it's male or female. By the time you've finished with helmets, flak armour, and all the rest of it, you can't tell if they're male or female. But then you run into the other complaint. How hard is it to make a guard army that doesn't appear to be a total sausage fest? The 2 points are completely contradictory. And if you're going to have that, then it completely negates the arguments about the Sisters of Battle being shamed for having breastplates, for having boob plate, should we say. Right? You see, you can't win. This is a no-win situation. No matter what it is that you do, somebody somewhere is going to find something to bitch about. And this really is the biggest point. Games Workshop, or Warhammer, if you will, only supply the kits. The sprues, the little fiddly bits of plastic that you glue together and paint. You put them together. You also know what they supply? It's this substance called green stuff, which is basically a slow-setting, sculptable putty. Oh look, you can make your own miniatures. You can convert shit. Yes, use them for conversion work, and the only limit to what can be achieved is your imagination, your individual skill. And it doesn't take a huge amount of skill, unless you're me, because I totally suck at trying to convert anything other than what should be a standard put together unit into what can only be described as something from a Lovecraftian and horrible nightmare, because I really am that bad at DIY. I regularly have to get other people to help me build stuff, because I am terrible. I will put my hands up to it. I am terrible. Okay, so your skill, your imagination, and it doesn't take a lot of skill, I am told, other than having at least one working hand, which even then sometimes I worry about, to add small breasts to a figure or smooth out a breastplate on another. It's not rocket science, is what we're trying to say. It's something that could be easily achievable if your petty little heart so desires it. Now, moving away from the human faction, we have the Dark Eldar, and the Eldar because the Dark Eldar are a subset of Eldar. So we have the Eldar and the Dark Eldar. Now, this is another army which is mainly female, and this gets flack for the skimpy attire. But again, what we're looking at is the few models out of a complete set that have this skimpy attire, and again, this can be easily fixed with a little bit of putty, and it can be justified, and the outfits are justified in the standing fluff. In this case, the Eldar have reflexes many times greater than a human, so they want the lighter armour, they want as little bogging down, as it were, to their bodies, so they can just get the fuck out of the way. They can sort of like run and jump and all the rest of it, rather than having to just grunt their way through damage. They can just get the fuck out of the way. So they don't want the armour, they don't want the bulky clothing, so they do want skimpy outfits. And then we get to the reason why they're the Dark Eldar in the first place. And this may be contentious to some, not to others, depends on how religious you are, but there is the small fact that the Dark Eldar are the hedonists. That these are the guys that live for sensation, and they are dedicated to sensation, and they're dedicated to seeking new forms of pleasure. And it depends on how well your imagination works, but in the lore, in the fluff, this dedication to debauchery and pleasure spawns a new chaos god. That's all about pleasure and sensation and everything else. So we'll leave it to your imaginations as to what they get up to, but that is the adult army, as it were, of the Warhammer universe. Now, the Eldar, who are separate from the Dark Eldar came from the Eldar, but they were kicked out because of their hedonistic and debauched ways. The regular Eldar army are also comprised of men and women. They do have female models, not overly sexualised beyond slight breastplate here, but then they're usually in squads that are traditionally women. So they have their own squads, and they have their own look in those squads, so that you know what sort of squad you're looking at when you're fighting them, and when you're fielding them as well. Eldar armour itself is pretty nondescript when it comes to identifying sex anyway. They're not human. They may have feminine characteristics like being slender and elven and all the rest of it, but we don't really know what the men and women look like without their armour, other than what we can sort of tell from the Dark Eldar. So, because they all wear helmets and everything else, then for all we know, they may all have tits. Just some big and some small. We don't know. Anyway, they all wear helmets, because why wouldn't you protect your head at least a little bit? I mean, come on, there's got to be some semblance of sort of reality imposed here somewhere. Right, now we get on to the Tau. And they're another army that doesn't care who serves it. Their armour similarly gives no clue as to what lies underneath, and as another alien species gives little clue even without a helmet. Minor paint details and a little work with a craft knife, boom, you've got whatever armour you want. It's the fact that you're taking the basic kit and changing it as you wish. And the only exception to this is being one of the commanders called Commander Shadowsun. Now, this is a noted individual female commander with a moulded head that isn't dissimilar to an ordinary troop. And if you want to, you can put a helmet on that one. Ooh, aren't we so edgy? Now, for anything else, sex isn't an issue. Necrons were living beings that God knows how long ago they lasted, that have elevated themselves into living metal bodies and stripped away much of their old identity in the process. Now, whilst the Codex does reference high-end Necrons with masculine traits, at the end of the day, who gives a shit? They're robots. They're Terminators, for crying out loud. That's it. Right, the Tyranids. Right, they're a rapidly mutating alien species that only cares about feeding and growing. They have no set gender, don't reproduce sexually, and gain no advantage from gender. And yet, a lot of their higher sort of non-tabletop creatures, the real massive ones, tend to have words that have been historically used to denigrate women. No one seems to know or care about that, mainly because most of you haven't heard of a dictionary. But termagant and all the rest of it, these used to be things, these used to be words that used to be to denigrate women. I mean, harridan is another one. Yeah, I'm not looking for a fight, I'm just saying, it all tends to be about appearance because that's all people can fucking worry about. Doesn't matter about anything else. It's all, oh no, they don't have boob plate, or they have boob plate, they don't have breasts and they shouldn't. Rather than the fact that actually the Tyranids generally tend to get used in somewhat female language with regards to the way in which things are done. Like there's always like the brood ships and things aren't technically considered to be kind of male. It's just the fact they have no set gender, and we wouldn't understand it even if we fucking did. The orcs, they're less. There's less of a dividing line here as well. You can argue they're more human-ish, but again, they generally don't have any gender technically, and they're reproduced in spores, so they don't reproduce sexually either. They release spores in life and death. They grow in time into grots that, given into time, will then grow into full orcs. However, the squads they use are known as boys and use masculine pronouns. This is again semantics, and I use this one to propagate an argument against the Tyranids, because it's the use of language. And when you look at the semantics of the orcs, their origins were most likely due to the fact they were based off football hooligans and the football violence of the 1980s. They were basically taking the piss out of Millwall. Right? There's nothing in the fluff. They can't be treated as women. It's just the fact that generally they're not moulded as women. So, like the Tyranids, orcs come in a number of shapes, sizes and hues. Nothing to stop them being feminine, although there would be rather butch ones, which again would probably lead people to have their own little breakdown and temper tantrum because they're butch. Now, we could go into various sub-factions and special organisations like the Skitari or the Inquisition, but that would take this video up to about a bloody fortnight to complete. Saying this, the organisations don't care about who really works for them. Male or female models are available, and generally are so armoured or fitted with mechanical devices that you can't tell anyway. And eventually we then come to the major point of contention, which are demons. Now, we've already mentioned the Dark Eldar have managed to spawn their own god about pleasure and hedonism and everything else, and we have 4 chaos gods, and 3 you couldn't tell what gender they had even if you have a bladed microscope, and if you got close enough you really wouldn't care. Khorne are generally humanoid, big, red, hairy, with a honking great sword, and they only care about killing things and blood. As far as we know, they have no genitals. Looking at the second god, you wouldn't want to get anywhere near Nurgles, because he's a bloated, maggot-infested corpse-like being that spreads plague and death and suffering. So again, even if he had genitals, you wouldn't want to get close to them. As far as we're aware, he doesn't have any. Tzeentch tends to fall into 2 categories. And Tzeentch, who is the Lord of Change and again is kind of like a chaotic change, not an ordinary structured one, has kind of warped, brightly coloured blob things with teeth, slender bird-like bipeds, and tends to be somewhat androgynous. There are no genitals to speak of, but if you really were pushed, contains both masculine and feminine traits, and therefore, really speaking, of the 4 gods, could be said to be the most demi-gendered, to put it in that kind of language. And then the only one which has any problems is the one that the Dark Eldar spawned, which is Slaanesh. The god, or goddess, we aren't particularly sure, because again, it's another one of these androgynous models that has female counterparts to it, but doesn't necessarily make it feminine, is the god or goddess of pleasure. And whilst these demons are typically nude female forms, sporting at least 1 set of breasts, and usually at least 1 bladed arm, you can get them with as many breasts as a cow. Why not? It's a feminine creature. But then people complain about this, and yet we have to say, if you look at the history from where this comes from, you don't really have a leg to stand on when you start complaining that servants of a god of freaking pleasure, of hedonism, are too sexual. They've been deliberately designed that way, and you've fallen right into the trap that they set. Now, again, this can be a null point. Taking the breasts off isn't difficult, downplaying them with a paint job, or if you really must, green stuff over the top. At the end of the day, they're your models, you can do with them what the hell you like, providing that they are recognisable to the rules so that your player that you're playing against can actually tell what it is that you're fielding, and not just an army of cardboard. Anything goes. And again, we've never heard anyone complain that you don't get Slaanesh male demons. I mean, given that their god changes gender on a whim, have some fun with them. Make a male one. Keep the breasts, but slap on a whacking Great Johnson. That would make a horse envious. Yeah? Who's stopping you? No one. You are, with your own imagination. That's the only thing. It's your imagination, and if you live in this petty little world where everything has to be in their own little box, then I pity you, because it's not the way the world works, and it's not the way that Slaanesh works, really. Slaanesh really is the most amorphous, the most gender-fluid thing that there is going, and should be championed for having been so gender-fluid, even before it was a thing in the 1980s. Go figure. You're all whinging about this, and yet it's been right under your nose the whole time. You want to be the gender-speckled Omnikin, play Slaanesh. Should suit you to a T. If you don't play Chaos, play Eldar. You can do the same with the Dark Eldar as well. There is such a thing as sacrificial and ritual mutilation, for example. Ha-ha! Anyway, this just wraps up about point 1. So yeah, there are far less women models than male ones on the shelves in a Games Workshop or Warhammer store. But then, as we've already been over half of the races have no specific gender anyway. And of those that do, most can't be readily told apart when they're in full armour and can be made to look female with very little effort. And if you really want a dickless army, then there is one that is completely composed of women. And then when you look at the over-sexualisation, well, that really does come down to a matter of opinion. The only real candidates here are the Sisters of Battle and certain Dark Eldar squads, and the Sisters you can't really complain about because they are fully armoured. I mean, at the end of the day, they are all women and wearing armour, and it's also a small part of the model which is easily changed. And the Dark Eldar, well, it makes sense fluff-wise. And don't forget that there is an old adage that sex sells. And that an army based on kinky soldiers in battle bikinis will appeal to some. This is a hobby that is meant to be available to all, after all. And who are you to deny someone else's pleasure? But there, the armies that I'm most known about are Magnus the Bronus, because as I say, I am completely shit, and he built Necron and Chaos. So he only had men and robots. These built pieces from other armies as one-offs, and yeah, it would be nice to have a little bit more variety, but then you're looking at the reasons why Games Workshop and the hobby as a whole is slow to change. If it isn't broke, they don't really want to fix it that much, unless it means they can make a lot more money from it. So even in a weird way, men are underrepresented in certain models and squads. And if you buy a box of troops, the heads are available with enough helmets for the whole squad, and maybe one actual head. The bulk of armies are mainly genderless, with them being full body sculpts out of plastic, in armour. It's not like you're putting the armour on and actually building it up from a central core. And then, with the exception of the Imperial Guard, they usually wear half helmets rather than full face, but they come with a variety of gas masks and everything else, and bearing in mind that the Imperial Guard tend to wear long flowing trench coats or flak armour and more piecemeal armour, you tend to have a little bit more visual representation there. But by and large, most people view that all of the models are men, when that is not the case. Now, this gets us on to the second contentious point. Point 2. If you want to have a break, I suggest that you pause the video here, go make yourself a cup of tea, and bring it back off pause, and then we shall start on with the next hoorah that we have, which is that there are no women in the fluff. And this is going to be too easy. It's no fun when you can't fight back. Right. Let's get the series bit out of the way. Yes, there are fewer female characters than male ones in 40k lore, both in rulebooks and the storybooks. But then, when there are, they're the ones that are often commanding the important roles and not token characters to be killed off. And this is largely due to the reasons we spoke about before. Most of the armies are gender neutral. The other big one is that a large number of the novels are about space marines. Right, so if you're looking at the books, yeah, most of them are about old Dickless over there who's 10 foot tall and all he can do is shoot his load through his Gatling gun. Or their Chaos Brethren, or about something else. Now, one of the Black Library's best-selling titles, The Horus Heresy, right, has got 39 volumes. So before you go anywhere else, you've got nearly 40 books all about the Space Marine. So you're going to have an imbalance. Now, if they weren't the bestsellers, they wouldn't have written them. Right? So it's obviously that the most of the market is hitting home, so you can't complain about what the market has decided. And even in those books dedicated to the men-only club, the Space Marines, women can be found. Not hysterically screaming or being needed to be rescued, hands clapped to the face as a leering cultist lift their dress before a heroic man saves them. No. They're doing the same work a man would, for the same pay, the same comfort of living, and frequently hold positions that most men of the Imperium would give his left nut for. Now, to prove this point, there's a few examples that can be thought of, and bearing in mind that not every rulebook, not every iteration, not every story, because I have to admit, I am not Games Workshop's biggest fan. I can only stomach a certain amount of the hyperbole and the world building they do in the books. I don't necessarily find to be all that great. There are certain series that I like, and there are series that I can't touch with a barge pole because I can't stand the writing. So, from that point being said, there will now be spoilers ahead from certain things. Right. Lavanna Ultorian from the Iron Warriors novel, Storm of Iron. Captured when her planet comes under surprise attack, loaded onto a truck, and sent on a suicide run into a minefield, whilst being shelled by her own comrades who believe it to be an enemy attack. Not only does she survive this, and, although recaptured, convinces a blood-crazed Chaos Marine to honour his word and let her live, she's forced to serve him. But she remains alive, which is no small feat in and of itself. And then in less than 3 months, she is so angry and so full of rage that she attracts the attention of the blood god Khorne, and something that other people fail to do in a lifetime of horrors. So we are talking about someone who is truly exceptional. From there, she goes on to murder her captor, a blood-crazed Chaos Space Marine. Right, so she's taken out a Space Marine who's fallen to the taint of Chaos. She takes his armour and eventually leaves the planet as a newly born avatar of Khorne. So straight away, just because they've got a shit ton of armour, you can't tell what's on underneath. So, that's one. Then we have Farseer Taldir from the Dawn of War, Dark Crusade. This is the game that we're talking about now. With the return of the Necrons on the planet Kronos, she leads the army sent to destroy this ancient enemy, the Eldar. However, the Necrons aren't the only problem waiting for her. You have Space Marines, Imperial Guard, Orcs, Tau, and Chaos, all fighting there for one reason or another. Faced with overwhelming odds, Taldir doesn't flinch from the challenge and instead tackles it in her own way. From hiding an entire stronghold from her enemy's sight, to ultimately retaking the planet at the end of the campaign, whilst you play as the Eldar. So, again, we're talking about someone who is hard as nails, not your average run-of-the-mill grunt. Carmetta, the Titan Child. First introduced in Ahriman, Exile. Whilst being forced to crew a vessel captured by Chaos Marines, notice a theme here about Chaos Marines? She's liberated, in the loosest sense of the word, when Ahriman of the Thousand Suns attacks it from within. Right, so you're talking about a Primarch. In exchange for helping Ahriman, she gets her life and command of the ship. In time, Carmetta learns how to interface with the ship and take complete control of it by herself. To put this in perspective, this is a workload that usually takes a crew of hundreds if not thousands. So she is able to do something that it takes hundreds of other people to do. So again, this isn't some fluff-driven, namby-pamby, oh look at me, I'm a woman. This is a hard-as-nails, can-do, get shit done bitch. She is there, she is going to take control, and she is going to wreck it as much as she can. This is not someone to be trifled with. So there is a history here, as you can see, of women who are hard as nails getting shit done. Right, what else have we got? We've got Corel Zeeth from the Horus Heresy Mecarnium, the Lady of Magma, one of the most renowned adepts of Mars during the Great Crusade. The ruler of Magma City, a place of her own invention, Zeth pioneers many new technologies. Right? Bearing in mind that the whole fluff and lore of the system is about how much of it is falling into death and decay, disrepair, because of technologies that have been lost, the fact that you actually have here someone that's inventing and pioneering new technologies is in and of itself a worthwhile marker which should give people pause for thought. Anyway, aware of her own genius and, more importantly, her own limits, she recruited from the most promising, not the smartest, but the most promising men and women to advise and aid her. When the heresy came to Mars, the Dark Mecarnium resurfaced, bringing with them the forbidden technology and weapons. Coriel Zeth fights against them for as long as possible, finally deactivating the shields protecting the base of the city, and drowning herself, Marvels and heretics alike in boiling lava to prevent the enemy from achieving her life's work. Not someone to be taken lightly. Lieutenant Mira, from the 2011 game creatively named Space Marine. She's stationed on a planet besieged by a million-strong orc horde looking to take the weapons and resources made there. Having fought and commanded for some time before the Space Marines even arrive, she continues to do so and aids the player character in the game. She provides important tactical information and fights alongside you at times. And even after Captain Titus unwittingly allows a Chaos Legion and demons to whoop onto the planet, Mira keeps on fighting and winning against odds that makes even the hardened gambler blink, and bearing in mind that she's not even the main character, the player is. And she's doing all of this to aid you, and you're supposed to be a Space Marine. She's not. She's pretty damn kick-ass. And at the end of the game, she stands shoulder to soldier, metaphorically with Titus, and even standing up to an Inquisitor when he accuses Titus of being corrupted by the Chaos incursion, and by extension everyone who served under him. Titus eventually yields and puts himself into custody on the condition that Mira, her people and his Ultramarines are left alone. Originally, this was planned to be the first of 3 games, so Lieutenant Mira may have returned. However, this is mere speculation, since the potential series died when developers THQ declared bankruptcy in 2012. So, no women in fluff. I think that we have pretty much debunked that one, and if you can't see where we're coming with vomit, then I pity you. I really do, for your really sheltered worldview and the fact that logic seems to have escaped you. And yes, I am being deliberately mocking, because this, out of all the arguments, is the weakest and the one that deserves to be derided the most, because we can prove it to be blatantly false in black and white very, very, very quickly, as we have done here. Anyway, again, if you wish to take a pause, take a break, pause the video here, because we're now going on to part 3, which is the toxic community. And according to some out there, workshops of game, which is now Warhammer, are infested far and wide with misogynists, man-children, basement dwellers of all kinds. Legions of leering perverts, horrible people who have the twitching nostrils that dare they be lifted from the plastic overlords, seem to emanate this leering, putrid fog of misogyny whenever a woman so much as opens the door. Once inside, any female who has dared transgress the threshold can expect anything from male gamers hitting on them within minutes, unsolicited physical contact, or sexually inappropriate comments. All of this being tolerated by management, who without fail will turn a blind eye to any complaints of this kind. Should a woman come back to this den of lions after buying their first miniature, God help her, no doubt the following will occur in double time. Being berated for not knowing all the rules right away, perhaps even told that this isn't a game for girls. Your paint job will be criticised, as well as you being criticised for not knowing all of the lore. After all of this, male patrons may continue to hit on you, and maybe even going so far as to buy models for you. Let that be a lesson for you. In short, every last man in the fandom is either a pimply teenager so overcome by hormones that he won't see you any more than a slab of meat, or an overweight 30-something with a receding hairline, double chin, and a 3-day funk wafting off of them, bearing in mind that they've probably had the only dip that they've seen recently is in the local sewage drain. And they all, to a person, will see you as being unable to play the game without help, and might even have the temerity to try and play Sugar Daddy. Oh boy, this is a big one. Like I say, we are going to need a few minutes here, so gird your loins, grab your cup of tea, make sure that Granny's nowhere in earshot and your headphones are on, because we are going to dismantle this one piece by piece. To start, there is a disclaimer. There is an asshole in every hobby, group and community. We can't help it. There's always got to be one. And as soon as you get rid of one, another takes his place. They're like fungus. They're like weeds. They're like orcs. It's entirely possible to find someone who embodies every single one of these traits. And the larger the store, the more likely you are to find them. We cannot help this, but you cannot judge an entire community from your interaction with one person. As much as we hate them, there are times when we have to tolerate them, because they have as much right to access the hobby as you do. The fact is, when their behaviour becomes out of control, we can take steps to control it. But if managers and other players don't know, because, let's be fair, some of us don't have the best social skills, we may not know how to deal with it. But the management surely can. And it is this is a hobby for everybody. And if someone makes you feel uncomfortable, call them the fuck out. Tell the manager, and I can guarantee you the manager will sort it. Now, with that disclaimer aside, in 20 years of gaming, I've met one. And Magnus the Brony hasn't met any who have had all of these traits. Now, and the one that I'd met was in a huge store in London. Right, so we're talking capital city, we're talking city of 7 million people, and I found one. Right? This is not something that is on a major scale, even though it is seen to be on a massive scale. And again, this comes down to hyperbole, and the fact that some women may not necessarily understand someone's intentions when all they're trying to do is be friendly. We do get people that do screw up without realising what they're doing. It's called human nature. We're fallible creatures. We all make mistakes. But again, take it to the manager, he will sort it. Right, so, after saying that, even after the disclaimer that yes, they do exist and you can find them, they generally tend to be in the larger stores, then there's the fact that neither the community nor the staff would let someone acting out to that extent go scot-free. They'd get called out on it. Regularly, in fact. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of this. Any woman who steps into a games workshop will be hit on, perhaps told how nice her arse is before copping a feel. What a load. Again, 20 years. Various gaming communities, 40k, Magic the Gathering, card games, video games, tabletop games. Nada, zip, never seen. Doesn't happen. Yet this is the one that we hear about always. This is the one that always happens. Never in our experience. If you have had that experience, then I do feel truly sorry for you, and if you'd have told the manager, they'd have probably got banned from the store. No manager could have let that ride because of the problems he'd have with his business. Word of mouth, all of that, he'd be gone. He can't afford that kind of reputation. Or she. Not necessarily saying all managers are men. I know at least one Warhammer store where the manager's a woman. So, we have that. And if there's one thing that I can say that ties communities together, it's that we always want new players. So anyone who actively discourages a new person won't have friends for long. Never mind the store not wanting the bad reputation. From Games Workshop and Warhammer, to Pathfinder, to late night Halo tournaments, if anyone in that we'd have met had acted like this, they'd most likely end up outside on their ear roll before too long. Communities that play these games are excruciatingly aware of their image and how false it is, and will come down hard on those who play out the stereotypes, because we do not want these kind of reputations. We already have the reputation, and we're doing everything that we can in our power to get rid of the damn thing. So the last thing we're going to do is play to the stereotype. In literally hundreds, if not thousands of hours playing locally in stores across the country, and even a couple of times abroad, let's be fair, we do travel, I have never come across a crowd that would let something like this pass. You might get the attempt to hit on you, but that's highly unlikely given the type of people who usually play with tabletop. We're not the most socially gifted people. You stand next to them, they're probably going to go bright red and sidle away from you. Because, oh, they're too close to me, I don't know what to say or do. And that, unfortunately, is a stereotype we do live up to, some of us. So let's say you draw the short straw, and this gets to occur in your local game store. All you have to do is politely let them know you're not interested. Most likely, he'll get laughed back to his seat by his mates. And life will continue as normal. And unless you found one of the real, genuine arseholes, this will be the end of it. So, worst case scenario, you found the genuine arsehole. As I started with this, they do exist but are a rarity. An extreme rarity. The same as any other gathering, right? Any other gathering. There's always an arsehole somewhere, eventually. And in my experience, if a woman or man was being harassed in any manner, both staff and community step in. The staff don't want you gone. In the nicest possible way we can put this, new people have money to spend. Money is the lifeblood of a business. Whilst this is a hobby, the stores are a business. So for them to stay open, they need you to enjoy the games, so they want you to spend the money to play the games, so then they can make money and stay open. Just because the misogynistic shitlord that happens to be an arsehole has done something that you don't like, doesn't mean to say that they're going to turn around and go, you know what, that's not on, but you spend so much money in the store you can get away with everything. No. Because once you are turned away and turned off from the hobby, then any of the friends that you might have had, male or female, that might be interested, are going to get told how much of a creep the people in that store are. So it's not just your money they're losing, but everybody else's that you talk to that could potentially be customers. Likewise, if you have a great experience, you tell all of your friends, and the business will stay open longer. This is the crux of it. The staff and the management are not going to want to lose their livelihood because of some idiot, ignoramus shitlord. The community aren't going to want their favourite hobby space to be closed down because of the actions of someone who keeps turning people away from the store. It isn't going to happen. They are not going to ignore this. Now, in a busy store, the larger stores, staff may not catch someone bothering you right away, but you guarantee that if you tell them, it gets sorted. They cannot afford to lose the custom or the reputation for being a friendly, open and welcoming space. They just can't, because of these stereotypes. Now, it may just be a verbal warning if they're not known to do this. You may not necessarily think that this is appropriate, but if he turns around and says, look, he's never done it before, we're really sorry that it's happened, and we'll promise to make sure it never happens again, this time we're just going to tell him off, is that okay? To, you know what, I think you need a couple of hours out of the store, maybe a couple of hours store ban might serve. They're not going to outright ban them from the store or group straight away just because of one complaint, which may not necessarily be to your satisfaction. But the fact is, if they are aware that this person has a problem and constantly keeps doing it, then they will get banned. They will be removed from the playing group. But, I mean, obviously we're talking about the seriousness of the allegation. But again, most of what we're talking about here are just people that are socially awkward, that may not take a hint the first time and may need someone to step in and go, oi, that's enough. But again, reputations are built and lost because of this stereotype, and they cannot afford to be seen to be playing to the stereotype, so action will be taken. And again, this is also something that has to be looked at, because a vast majority of especially Games Workshop stores, a large portion of their customers are young teens and sometimes children. You won't even get swearing tolerated. So bad language would get them into trouble. The wrong topics can get you into trouble in a Warhammer store. Know this one personally, where someone started talking politics, and the politics got a little bit what's the word I can use? Heated isn't the right word, but it became a little bit intrusive into the store atmosphere. So they were told, shut up or leave. They didn't like being told to shut up or leave, so they left. But this is what I'm saying, it doesn't even have to be an overt action. It can just be someone that changes the tempo or the atmosphere of a store. And if someone is bringing you down, you can guarantee the atmosphere is going to change, and it's not going to be a pleasant place for anybody, so something will be done. We're talking personal experience. Now, and that's without the other gamers. So far we've just concentrated on the management and staff. Now, the other gamers themselves rarely stand for this kind of behaviour without speaking up. We are so sick of the negative light cast on gamers, and tabletop gamers in particular, because of the actions of a toxic few. It has been that we've seen other players go, oi, pack that in, I'm not happy with you doing that. Letting people know when they step out of line, and making it clear when they do something to make themselves unwelcome. And these are the other players themselves. Now, that covers getting hit on, and I hope that it goes without saying that if someone was to get physical against another person, then they'd get bundled out of the store without even saying go. That itself is something that's beyond the pale. And depending on the game store and severity of the action, either barred for a time, barred with police on the way. Yeah? I mean, not all of us are going to sit back and say, you know what, we're going to tolerate it, we're just going to throw you out. Some of them will turn around and go, no, you shouldn't have fucking done that, it's against the law. Calling the police. And that's without a potential kicking from the club members around the corner because they've made themselves unwelcome. Now, these are all things that can be done, that get covered. And yet the response is always, oh, this happened to me in a store and nothing ever happened, which I cry bollocks on. Now, the response will vary from club to club, but that's because most clubs know their members and know usually the best way to handle certain people. But by and large, the most that would happen is you'd get an unwanted hug. But generally only the once. Because all you've got to do is tell them that you don't like hugs, and that will stop. And that's only because, and I can talk from experience on this, we have a couple of ladies that come to our local gaming club, and they quite enjoy giving out hugs. Now, if a new lady comes, and someone says, oh, can I have a hug? You might go, no. Oh, alright, fair enough. But that's only because of the actions of somebody else. And what you've noticed is that there was the question first. The people that get the hugs from the women that like giving out the hugs have learnt to ask. They don't just go up and fucking hug you. They don't just grab you. Right? It all comes down to what we're socialised to be like. And these are guys that don't get to speak to a lot of women necessarily, and it's kind of like, oh, can I have a hug? Yeah, I like giving hugs, I'll give you a hug. Yeah? It's simple. It's called human interaction, and sometimes we get it wrong, but most of the time we get it right. But again, unwanted hug. Someone gropes you on the other hand, they're out, they're gone. Not tolerated in any way, shape or form. Yeah? Now, another area that is often covered are sexual comments. Now, I can't speak from experience on this, but on the whole, this is generally a myth, with one small caveat. It depends on the crowd, and there might be those who make comments about female gamers. In my experience, this has been when there aren't any women around. Usually because the women who would be around, if they heard that, would probably give them a kicking themselves. So usually, the comments that are heard when women aren't around are usually somewhat humorous and about the experience that they've had with those people. And they're generally sort of, oh, I can't say this because otherwise I'd get a slap sort of thing. Again, I'm not excusing this, but most gamers do know there's a time and a place to say certain things. Just as most women talk about men in certain areas at certain times with other women, men talk about women as well. It's one of those things. If you don't like it, if you don't accept that, then I really do feel sorry for you. Because as a society, as a gender, as a species, we all have people that do it, even if we don't do it ourselves, and we don't think it's a good thing. We all know people who do. So, that being said, not the best example of our gender, but it happens. And it happens the other way around as well. Now, from the gamer's perspective, we like having women around. Women are nice people, generally. We like, and we like to talk about them with other men. Usually, we're quite complimentary. Usually, it's kind of, sometimes it's worry. Oh, have you seen so and so recently? No, we've not heard anything from them. Oh, I hope they're okay. Hope they're not going through anything. You know, some of the times these conversations are perfectly banal. But then there are people that sometimes do say other things. Now, sometimes an off-colour joke may arise, which tests the water. Now, again, if this is something that the woman doesn't like, say so. And again, bam, straight away, done. Never again. Sorted. Now you might overhear people. Talking about, or again, you might get that genuine arsehole who is the fucking unicorn, who just shouts "nice tits, love" every time you walk in. But again, you can guarantee if anyone speaks up about this, action is going to be taken, and may even get addressed before you speak out. You may not even have a chance to complain before someone says or does something to shut the jackass up. Now, as to straight-up criticism, right, this is harder, because we do have those who are complete and utter total rules lawyers. Now, they may know every rule written inside and outside of the bloody game, who always has something to say about your painting, and knows the law better than the bloody nativity story. Now, these are another subspecies of arsehole, are in the minority, and I can bet you bottom dollar they're not just doing it to you. They're doing it to the blokes as well, because they have some kind of superiority complex, or maybe even inferiority complex, where they're constantly trying to pull other people down to make themselves feel better. There are plenty of them with something useful to say, ways for remembering things, or who genuinely may actually be trying to help you with a painting tip. They may volunteer this unwarrantedly, and they may not necessarily come across the best way. But if you respond and say, look, this is the way things are, then you can work out which one is being a twat and which one is actually trying to help and hasn't got the social skills, because they're not that great at doing it. Just trying to help some of them, not all of them, but they can make mistakes the same as any other human being. This is why we're having to use the caveat on this, because there are arseholes out there, and we know the rules lawyers, we know the win at all cost players, we know those who we watch. I mean, if we've got someone who does this on a regular basis and does it to every bugger else, then we wait until they finish and then sidle up and go, you know what, don't listen to him, he does it to everybody. He does this and this and this and this. It's not you. He's done it to me. He's done it to my mate over there. Right? He's an arsehole. But because he's an arsehole about the rules, because he's an arsehole about painting, he's not overtly doing anything wrong other than just being a superior prick. People will tell you. People will intercede. Because again, we like to have women around. It makes for a nicer environment. Why? Because blokes tend to be a little bit nicer when women are around. They don't turn into cavemen. And again, if you get someone like this and you feel uncomfortable about the advice, say so. And if they don't stop straight away, say so again, and somebody else will pick up on this. Now, as for the idea that gamers push away women, claiming they don't understand it, that is just wrong. Now, I've never seen that. We bend over backwards to help teach rules. At my locals, the percentages have fluxed, but we've always stayed somewhere between 10 and 25% female members. Women aren't being turned away. We welcome women into the mix because, one, there's someone new to talk to, and they bring a different perspective on some of our games. Sometimes our games change for the better because we've got to think about things in slightly different ways. It benefits everybody, the new person and the club. So yeah, and 10 to 25% is a good average for our club, and we are higher than most. So we must be doing something right here. Now, to the person that tries to buy the woman things to butter her up. Have to admit I've not seen that either. If common decency wasn't enough, have you actually seen the price of some of this shit that goes on? If you make friends with people at your local, you might be able to borrow glue and a paintbrush. And sometimes paint as well. Now, in the nicest possible way, if we could afford to get ourselves another model kit that day, we'd have bought one ourselves. We'd have bought it for us. Now, just maybe, you'd get bought something like a pot of paint, or given a spare sprue. Most likely because you're a little short. Or a friend might be thinking of helping, because there's something that they don't actually need. They're just trying to be friendly and help you. They're not necessarily trying to get anything out of it. Now, if you imagine that you'd heard a statement like this at the start, but not where it took place, does it sound like something that would happen in real life? Now, some of these elements, maybe. Sporadically, in various times and places. But all of them to happen repeatedly? I wouldn't expect that kind of behaviour in a back alley or on the wrong side of town. Let alone a brightly lit games shop on the high street. As I've said consistently through this, there is always an asshole somewhere. But not anywhere near the degree that people have written about. Now, I'm not going to say that these people have completely lied in their articles, but I will say that I believe you'd have to trip over a pot of gold, tumble through an entire field of four-leaved clovers, and come out clutching a winning lottery ticket before you got someone that had done or experienced all of these things in one place. Now, the fact that these articles help to perpetuate the idea that tabletop gamers are a freaky subspecies of humanity who deserve to be locked in their basement for the greater good, and I will point you to a narrative where they want to say that for all men regardless of hobby. Gamers of all stripes have taken their fair share of flack over the years, and although this is decreasing for the console and mobile market, and even then, not even then, I've seen tweets where women have gone, Pokemon Go, gamers walking around the street, I don't like this, won't Pokemon Go, hashtag Pokemon Go away. So even the fact that we had someone playing a game on the street, on their mobile, minding their own bloody business, was too much for some woman on Twitter, because they had to tweet about it, and if I saw it, you can guarantee thousands of other people did as well. Now, we are trying to decrease this stigma, but there's something about gaming on a table that seems to hold this stigma true, even when we can blatantly falsify it. Why? We're artists, we're strategists, we're readers, jokers, statisticians. We're gamblers who don't gamble with money. We're gamblers that gamble with ideas and tactics and strategies. We gamble with little plastic men on tables to try and take out their little plastic men before they take out our little plastic men. So we're the best kind of gambler because we don't actually lose money when we play. We only lose money when we buy the overpriced bits of plastic to play. If this describes you, then you're the same with us. If you cut us, We do not take a fortitude save and suffer bleed damage. We just bleed. Now, since we've gone through this, one of the things that hasn't been addressed and wasn't addressed by the original videos, and I would just like to put this on as an addendum, is a lot of the times we see complaints about the character designs of women being overtly sexualized and everything else in other media, like in card games or in board games or in video games. And I would just like to take this point to actually point out that one of the most controversial females drawn in modern times was Bayonetta. And what most people don't realise is that Bayonetta was designed by a woman. It is a female power fantasy. So it's not a man saying, oh, I want the woman to look like this. This is a woman who has designed the character. And she's designed the backstory, the ability, all the rest of it. She's the lead designer. And I also want to give a shout out to another game which is only just coming over here in the UK. And if you have made it this far into the video, I applaud you. And I really hope that you visit a company, Alpha Investments on YouTube. And they are another gaming channel. I'm giving them a shout out here because they have found a game called Megacorp from Singapore as a trading card game. It's now trading worldwide. And I was lucky enough to be one of the first 40 odd orders placed with the company. And this is another card game with a woman lead artist. So I would dearly love to see this game gain traction, take a foothold, and again prove the lie to the sayings that women aren't represented in games, that women aren't able to direct the way in which games are going. This is a woman who is the lead artist. The game is called Megacorp, and if you are interested in it, you can find it for sale at mythandmachine.co.uk. mythandmachine.co.uk is a new website currently in beta testing, which aims to raise money for clubs for people with social anxiety disorders or other health issues that usually don't get to associate with others, and uses the gaming industry as a way of providing the social lubricant for people to get to know each other and socialise, who are traditionally excluded from the workplace and from hobby space. Ultimately, we aim to try and provide jobs for people who are traditionally excluded from the workplace, but that is a long-term goal, not the short-term goal. The short-term goal is merely to be able to get into a position where we can have a permanent space for gamers who have social anxiety and other problems come and feel safe, so that they can game in peace and meet other people who are in similar positions, who can empathise and who enjoy the hobby as much as they do. Thank you for listening to this piece. I, as always, have been Voice of the Forge, and I also thank Magnus the Brony for preparing a lot of the material that I've talked about today. So, I thank you once more for listening. If you do like what we're doing, then please like and subscribe. Please feel free to follow us on Twitter. I am Voice of the Forge. You can find us on YouTube as Voice of the Forge with Forgotten Forge Gaming. You can find us on Facebook as Forgotten Forge Gaming, and you can find us on Patreon, Voice of the Forge, and online as Myth and Machine as a web store. If you find Myth and Machine, we do have links to our Patreon, Twitch, YouTube and Twitter handles as well. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.